Hey guys, Gus here. I'm going to be painting a Warrior of Chaos Nurgle. So I've just done a very quick conversion on this miniature, and you'll see I've given him a double-handed flail. I've got him on a piece of cork for when I paint him, and I'll attach the hand and the weapons towards the end of this project. And I'll also be building at the end. I'll also be building a scenic base for him. So without further ado, let's begin. So initially all I'm going to do is base coat the armour with Castellan green, which is the old Catachan green, and I'm going to base coat the cloak with scorched brown, cloak and the leather. I'm just very accurately applying the base coat, and what I'll probably do is finish off the first coat and then go back and do a second coat. And I'm just going to go back in for a second coat of paint for the base coat once the first layer is dry. And you'll notice that I am getting paint in a lot of the cracks and crevices, but that is because I will go over the miniature much later and probably do some lining effects right towards the end of this tutorial. Okay, now that the miniature has a nice, solid and very smooth base coat of the Catachan green, I'm going to go back in now with the poopy brown or scorch brown, and I'm going to base coat all of the leather, the cape, the boots, and also his gloves, his gauntlets, and the leather bindings on the weapon with scorch brown. Again, this is probably going to require about 2 coats, just so I've got a nice, thick, and very smooth base coat on the actual miniature. I'm just going to give the gloves and the leather on the weapon a first coat of scorched brown. Again, making sure it's nice and even and smooth. I'll probably go back for a second coat, and I'm not particularly worrying about getting it on the other areas of the miniature because these are the main colours, and as I said before, I'll probably sort of line and block out the other areas once I've finished the sort of main bits of the miniature. I'll go back and line everything and block it all out and black it again, and then I will go back in and do all the rest. Ooh, I've just spotted some evil mould lines on the boots. This is a very old miniature that I dug out of my drawer, so I need to remove these mould lines ever so quickly with my hobby knife. So now those pesky mould lines are taken care of, I can continue base coating. So that's everything base coated with the scorched brown that needs to be. I've done 2 coats on the cloak, and I'll just go back over a few more bits and bobs that need to be recoated now. So another coat over the gloves and the leather straps on the weapon, and probably the belt, and also the piece of leather that joins the cloak to the armour as well. Just that little piece over there. So I'll just recoat those now. Okay, this is something I actually should have done at the start. So when I record these, I will record them with mistakes and all. So I should have really done the fur at the start. So what I'll do is I'll do that now quickly before I actually start doing all the detail on the armour and the cloak. So I'm just going to put a bit of paint that with a bit of Yandan Dark Sun, which is an old foundation colour. I'm going to get that on there and base coat it nicely. I'm just going to be quite careful to not get the paint on the actual armour surface and the underlying cloak. It's probably going to require 2 coats because this is coming out quite thin for some reason. Alright, I know this is going to look quite odd with the camera angle changing, but I couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle freaking leaning forward onto a table. I don't normally paint like that. I paint reclining back in my chair, so I'm cradling the camera in my arm now and I'm a lot more comfortable, so I'll be able to paint a lot better. So I'm just getting towards the end of finishing the fur with the first coat, and after this I'll apply a second coat. It's got a nice base coat on, and I'll proceed to dry brush the fur and get that done before proceeding with the rest of the miniature. So I'm just going to give it a quick second coat on the fur before I move on to dry brushing it. So now that the fur is base coated, I'm going to do a quick dry brush of Carrick Stone, and then I'm going to move on to a final very dry brush of bleached bone. Good thing I've got a little wooden palette on my lap here, so just use that. Nice dry brush, yes. So this first one is going to be a fairly heavy dry brush, and then the second one will naturally be a lighter dry brush. So I'm just finishing up this dry brush now, the first one with my trusty flat brush. You can see this is quite a heavy dry brush, so to speak. I will have to go back and touch up a few areas before I move on with the with getting all the color transitions and highlights done with glazing. Okay, so I'll then even clean my brush off, and I'm going to go into a bit of bleached bone. And just use a very light dry brush of this, so I need to wipe it off fairly heavily, and there's going to be a light touch of this. Watch me mess it up. Cool, so I'm fairly happy with that fur. It's as good a dry brush as I'm going to get, and then I'm just going to go back, touch up a few areas, and then I'll proceed with getting the main armor plates and the leather done. Okay, so now to move on to the armor. Now I haven't decided yet how I'm going to highlight the armor, either camo green or bleached bone. Camo green or bleached bone, camo or bone. I think what I'll do is both. I'll probably go with camo first, and then when I lighten the camo up, I'll use bone coloured. And the way I'm going to do it is, essentially I need to pick a light point. So the way I'm going to do it is, if you look at the miniature with the flail, it'll give you a better idea of what I'm going for here. So that's in with the flail. Now if you see towards the centre, and you see what's obscured and what isn't when you look at this with this flail, okay? So the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to go for a sort of central highlight. So these plates here will be highlighted towards the middle and lower. So that area there will be highlighted. okay, and this will be highlighted towards the lower, and then all of the knee plates will be highlighted towards the middle and upper, so that edge there in the middle, and the central chest will just be towards the center, so that upper center region there. Okay, so sorry, naturally the shoulder pads will probably be highlighted towards the lower edges. Okay, so let's start doing some glazing. So with the armor, I'm simply going to jump straight to camo green. So you look at the difference between Castellan green and camo green. It is quite big, quite a big difference, but they're both greens. So I'm just going to go straight to camo green, really thin glaze, probably about 3 coats to build it up, and then I'll move on to this and a mixture of bleach bone, and then finally pure bleach bone. Alright, let's get on with it. So I'm just going to mix up my first glaze really quickly using Lamium medium into the palette. That's about 3 brushes of paint, and I'll put about 5 drops of medium onto the palette, mix it in with the paint. As you can see there, it's getting nice and thin. Mix it all in together, and let's see what we got. So as you can see, that's a really, really thin paint. Do the old skin test and see how this turns out. Yeah, nice and thin, perfect. There we go, there we go. That's the shit! Right, let's get on with it. Okay, so as I said before, I'm going to highlight towards the center. So load the brush with paint, wipe a little bit of the excess off, not too much. And now simply all you're doing is you're dragging the paint in towards the edge that you wish to highlight, like so. So like I said, the middle and lower, so that sort of area. Now don't worry too much about the little bolts in the armor plates, because I will put a black ring around those, and I'm going to add some rust effects to those at the end. So that's the first one there. Okay, and then simply keep doing that. And it's going to take about 3 coats, normally about 3, and then you get a decent color transition. So as you can see, I'm just dragging the paint to where I want it to be, and the trick to this is not to overwork it. So do it like that, and then you just leave it. All right, because the more you overwork it, you can end up with, I don't know if you can make it out there, a slight watermark if you overwork it too much. So now I'm establishing my highlights like so, and yeah, there we go. So I'm just going to continue in this fashion around all the armor plates where I want my highlights to be. I'll just demonstrate these ones here. So this one's going to be in towards the center, like so. So hold the brush the right way, in towards the center, like so. Whoop, mistake there, that's alright. In towards the center and up to that raised edge. So nice and easy, there we go. Like so. Let's blot a bit of that out, wipe the brush off, a bit too much on there. There we go, that is the shit. Cool. The other knee pad, and I'll just continue this fashion, and I'll get back to you with the second coat. So for the helmet, what I'm probably going to do is I'll highlight it towards the edges in the middle, okay, probably in the middle and down, and then also along the top. Okay, so that's the first round of glazing pretty much done, and like I said, I'll probably do another 2 coats on this then, just to keep building up the colour. So it's the same thing again, you're just starting from a closer point to where you want to highlight, and you just continue in this fashion, easy peasy lemon squeezy. Like I said, it takes a bit of patience, and it just takes a bit of getting used to, really, getting used to the paint, and you can get your seamless colour transitions that you've always wanted. Alright, so I'll see you after this round. So you can see here after just excuse me, after just 3 coats of glaze, how all the highlights are starting to pick up. So now you've got the sort of general highlights, and now you start pushing them, you start going higher and higher. So the next thing I'll do is I'll be doing a glaze with bleach bone, but it'll be a very fine glaze on the edges, and then right at the end I'll pick out the ever so prominent points with pure bleached bone, so it really starts picking it up. And then once you start neatening everything up with black lines, it all comes together quite nicely. So I'm just going to prepare the second glaze now using bleached bone and a bit of the Lamium medium again. So that's about 3 brushes worth of paint, and again I'll probably put about 5 drops or so of this colour, purely because I mean, it needs to be diluted quite a lot, because when you're using bleached bone over dark colours, you tend to get watermarks quite easily when you're using the glazes, so it does need to be diluted quite a bit. We'll try that. We'll see how this works. Just have to be quite careful, that's all. Okay, so same thing again, except this time what we're going to do is we're going to use this bleached bone right on the edges as a glaze. So instead of actually highlighting the edges like you would do with pure paint, this is going to be used right on the edges and dragged towards the edges. So let's just do the skin test really quickly. Yep, that's all good. So really carefully, just gonna drag it right towards, there we go, that's the shade. So again, you need to be really careful with this colour, and very sure not to overwork it, because you will end up with watermarks. Okay, and then you just continue in this fashion for the rest of the miniature. And also, this is where you can start adding on the sort of light highlights that will catch the edging. So, for example, if you look at the groin plate, if you look at those little notches in it there, those would catch the light. So you can start adding in tiny little highlights into there, just as those would catch the light. And you can always come back and fix this up later. So I'm going to crack on with that for now. So as you can see now, I've done the first round of glazing with the bleached bone, and it does come out quite strong. The helmet's a little bit rugged and not really happy with that. However, I will fix that. So I'll probably only end up doing 2 rounds of glazing with the bleached bone, and then I'll go into sort of hard edge highlights. Okay, so I'm relatively happy with the armour. So now it's a case of going in and doing some of the sharper highlights before I start blocking areas off with black lining to make it look a bit neater and start working on some of the other things. The next thing I'll probably work on is a cloak. So for the highlights I'll use bleached bone. I'll use pure bleached bone, and I'll only thin it down ever so slightly with the glaze that I used previously. Just thin that down. Good stuff. And then I'll just do really careful. Watch me mess it up. Really careful edge highlights. Now, you probably all know how sort of chalky the lighter paints can get, so you just got to be really careful and just get the edges where the light would catch. Now, when you start doing hard surfaces like armour, this can be quite important. On soft surfaces, not so much, but hard surfaces, this sort of get the camera right. This sort of edge highlighting gives the armour its hard, sort of angular appearance, which is what you need really. So you can see there's really small edge highlights just to give it shape and definition before I start blocking it out. So I'll just continue in that fashion. Wherever the light would catch the edges of the armour, I'll continue highlighting. And also, this is when you start to give things like your edges definition. So if you look at like the knee pads and also the chest, we've got a ridge. This is when you want to start using really thin lining to define those ridges. So like if you look at the knee pad there, I've put a really thin line just to define that edge. So you can see, this is not the best example, but you can see how I've started to catch the edges of the miniature. And now to neaten this all up, this is when you want to go back and you want to start lining, so essentially using black lines and breaking everything up again. Okay, so you're probably wondering what the heck I mean by the lining. So essentially what it is using I normally use a size 1, and as long as it makes a sharp enough point, you'll be okay. And using sort of black paint slightly thinned down so it doesn't dry up too quickly. All you're doing is you're going to, so if you look here, you've got the sort of where you've got like the chainmail bordering the armour. You'd add a sort of a thin, really thin black line in between that. You'd add a really thin black line in between armour plates, in between where the armour and the boots are, where they're joined, sorry. And you'd also add in like very thin black lines sort of where the actual armour plates join themselves. So places like that. So yeah. So I'll crack on with that now. So I'll quickly demo what I mean by lining. Now bear with me, I'll probably make some funny noises because I might have to hold my breath during this. Now it's important with the black lining to make sure the lines are straight, because a lot of the time if you shake they get quite wobbly, and that's not what you need. So I don't know if you can make it out, but that's the sort of thing you're looking at, is very thin black lines in between the pieces. Okay, and this will become more apparent later on. You'll see the sort of effect that this has in the miniature, and it's actually quite pronounced. Okay, so I'll crack on with that and do the armor plates. Okay, so that's the lining on the armor done. So now you can see what I mean. When you line things and you start to cut away all of the things essentially the paint is leaked onto, you get a much cleaner, sharper and much more defined look on the armor. So let me just get some more light on this dude. There we go. So hopefully you can make that out. So there's the armor pretty much done. Okay, I mean if you wanted to you could push the highlights even further and go up to like a pure tiny little dots of pure white, but I'm going to do some rust effects on the rivets on the armor later on. So that, and the thing is, right, I used glazing on this. Now if you want to do non-metallic metals, it's exactly the same, you're just using different colors. If you want to do object source lighting, you just pick the direction the light is coming from and pick the color of your light, and it's the same thing. You just pick your light point and you go with whatever colors you want, and that's how it works. So I'll be moving on to the cloak, and I'll be doing some weathering techniques on the cloak using some AK stuff. So yeah, look forward to that. I'm gonna cut your head off. Okay, so now that I've finished most of the armor, I'm gonna go ahead and layer. I've done the base coat and all the leather with scorched brown. Now I'm going to go ahead and put on a coat of heavy chipping effect from AK. So I'm going to put a single coat of this on and wait for it to dry before I start doing the rest of my highlights on the leather. So I'm just going to use a slightly larger brush for this one just to apply the heavy chipping effects. And very simply apply this to all of the leather. Make sure you get a really nice thick coat of this stuff on. And I'm just going to go ahead and coat all of the leather, including the boots and the belt and also the gloves. So once your coat of heavy chipping is dry, what I'm going to do then is I'm going to use a scorched brown, and I'm going to use a glaze of bestial brown, and essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to work up to beef steel brown, and then for my lighter colour, because I want the leather to look quite worn and weathered, I'm going to start working up to carrick stone. And once I'm up to that, I'll chip off some of the paint, yeah, and see what it looks like. So let's go for it. So I'm just going to get this prepared by probably using about, same as usual, about 3 brushes worth. Back down to the sort of size 1 paintbrush now, and then probably about 5 drops of glaze, medium, again as usual. Yeah, that'll work. Now with this AK heavy chipping effect, you can see in that recess there that's not quite dry, but the rest of it has sort of a sheen to it, so you just need to make sure the stuff is dry, alright, before you start work. Well, that's all good, It's very important with the heavy chipping though, to make sure that the undercoat, I've actually left this for a day, so it's like the next day I'm filming this, before I put that heavy chipping over the scorched brown, because that paint needs to be fully dry, like completely dry before you put on that AK heavy chipping, or else when you scrape the paint off, you'll just scrape it right down to the base coat, and that's not what you want. Alright, so this brown is about ready to go here, nice and thin. Alright, and then it's just the same as always. So with the cloak, I'm going to do it up to the raised areas, and then also down to the ends. Alright, so let's start with this first one here. So I'll start with that prominent sort of bit of ruffled leather there, and very easily, or very gently rather, just drag that up to the raised area. And as always, don't worry about getting the paint on other areas that aren't done yet, because you can just re-black those areas when you get around to doing them later on. So with this first coat of brown, you can be sort of fairly bold with the colours, because bearing in mind this is going to be a worn out old cloak, so it's going to look blotchy and it's going to look messy. It's not going to look very clean. So you can be pretty liberal with this. Obviously you still need to control it, but remember your colour transitions, because you're going through 2 colours here. So this is really to give the overall effect, and then building up the highlights ever so gradually. Again, I'll probably do about three coats of glaze, see how it looks, and then I'll move on to sort of the carrick stone at the end. So when you get to the boots, you have to be obviously really careful, because you've got these tiny little edges on the miniature. You just be very careful, ever so lightly dabbing onto the raised areas, getting that colour transition, and just getting that overall effect to start off with before you really start pushing those colour transitions. And then just moving on to the gloves and doing the same thing again, making sure it's all properly dry. I'm not going to do the leather strapping, I'm just actually going to do the gloves themselves. Now bearing in mind he's going to be carrying his weapon that way, and the light's going to be hitting from that direction, so you want to glaze up to the prominent points, like so. So same again as the armour, which I'm actually going to touch up afterwards anyway. I'm probably going to require about 3 coats of this first brown, and just building up these highlights before I actually move on to the carrick stone. So I'll start the second one now. Now that I'm more or less happy with the brown and the cloak, just to get that overall tint and colour into the leather, I'm going to move on to the carrick stone, and again probably about 2 or 3 brushes worth and about 6 drops of medium to get this one prepared. Alright, so that's all prepared, and then same again, so just going up to the most prominent points. I'm actually going to put another drop of medium into this, a 2. Just because the light colours tend to, you tend to get that watermark effect with the lighter colours, because they get picked up a lot easier. There we go. Alright, so same again. Make sure there's enough taken off of it. And, yeah, so same again. Now we've defined these prominent points, we can start picking them out with this really light colour. And just being really, really careful. There we go. Like so. Alright, and carry on in that fashion. So as you can see what I'm doing here, the glaze itself, even though it's getting picked up a bit too much, what you're doing is you're still dragging it to the prominent areas, and you're getting this sort of really worn leather look. Don't worry about the texture for now, that's sheen, we can fix that. So if you imagine that's a prominent point, all you're doing is you're flattening out the brush, getting the glaze on the brush that's nice and flat, wiping a bit off on your finger, and then you're using the flat of the brush to drag it up ever so lightly up to the prominent points. So any of that sort of streaky, very worn leather look, which is exactly what we're after, is worn, messed up, old looking leather, right? There we go, and you just keep going in that fashion. You do this a couple of times and just build it up, and you get that sort of worn leather effect. That blotchy, old, worn leather. It's exactly what we want for Nurgle, right? Here we go. So you can see how it's coming out here. Let's try and get rid of this sheen. There we go. Have a better view. And then what we'll do is later on we'll chip some of this off, and we'll make it even more ruddy. So also what you can do now is you can see the little natural holes in the sculpt. You can just highlight the with this glaze the bottom edge of those holes like so. Do that a couple of times and that will make those stand out and look quite good. Alright, so you keep going in this fashion all the leather until you're happy with the effect. Now what I'm doing is I'm just highlighting the top edges of like the boots and the belt, just because you'll notice that the top edge is very, very dark and the bottom edge is caught with the light. So I'm just going to do a very, very sort of thin and dappled line on the top of the boots, like so. So now you're getting that contrast from the dark line that we did before between the light lip of the leather, which is quite a nice contrast. Now the moment of truth. So using a dental pick and a fairly large brush, I'm going to wet the surface, and then I'm going to scrape some of the paint off the outside because it's got the AK heavy chipping underneath. So wet the surface, scrape it off, and then I will highlight the cracks. So, here's my brush loaded with water, and I'll just do it section by section like so. So wet that section, grab the pick, and it should, he says, just crack straight off. There we go, there we go. Good stuff, good stuff. Here we go, small cracks in the surface of the leather. Then we just keep going like so. Cracks there. Just keep going over all the leather surfaces like so. Small cracks. So you just keep making small cracks and slashes over the whole cloak and the surface. And then you'll find, because it's peeling the paint, you want to just keep wiping it, and it will get rid of those small little sort of marbles of paint. Now these actual little cracks and highlights will actually highlight those individual cracks themselves. So it should look, he says, fairly good when we're done. Here's hoping, right? We'll just keep going over all of the leather surfaces like that. Okay. Okay. Now that the everything's been chipped, you can kind of see where the sort of effect that's going to be happening. Look at the front. See all the small chips. Now these individual chips need to be highlighted. Okay, and the way to do it is to highlight the bottom edge of the actual individual chips, and you do it with the Carrick stone. As you can see, we still got the glaze left, and that's actually been thickening up as I've been doing the chipping. So we can actually use that to highlight the bottom of the chips. So just got to wait for it all to dry now, because it's still got water left. Highlight the bottom and then seal it all again. So now that all of the water has dried off of the miniature, I'm now going to start highlighting the bottom of all the cracks in the leather using that same glaze as I used before. As it's now started to dry and thicken up, it'll be perfect. So I'm just going to crack on with that. So I'm just going to really carefully use this thickened up glaze now to highlight the bottom edge of the cracks and creases, making sure not to load my brush too heavily, getting a nice fine point. We'll start off on this side and just ever so lightly start highlighting these cracks like so. And just keep going like that. So as you can see here, I've just highlighted the bottom edges of the scuffs and chips, and you can see the sort of effect. It does take a long time to do, but you know, I think it looks it does look fairly good on the actual cloak, and it fits in with the theme of everything's all sort of worn out and chipped and scuffed, you know, the whole theme of Nurgle. So that's what it did. It does, you know, it is fiddly and it does take a lot of time, but it adds to the effect. So you just keep doing this in the same fashion around the entire, all the leather, all the areas of leather, and then once I've done this, I'll then seal the leather afterwards. So what I'm going to do now is just seal the leather down with one of the best products Vallejo makes, which is the satin varnish. Give that a shake, and then just apply that to all of the leather. Nice even coat with my larger brush, and that will seal all the leather. And then I'll actually go back to the armour and I'll do some corrections in the armour. And when applying the satin varnish, so you be really careful to not actually abrade the painting. You actually have to apply it on very softly. That's probably the right word. So you just got to apply that very gently to the leather, because this can actually slough paint off underneath. So just do that for all of the leather surfaces. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to go back and there's a few things I'm not happy with this miniature so far. I mean, I'm happy with the leather. That looks all cracked and decrepit, the way that I wanted it to look. However, the armour, you'll notice a few areas here I'm not particularly happy with. The leg plates are not too bad. That chest piece there, it's not 100% smooth, and the head has got a few blotchy areas on. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go back with the armour. I'm actually going to use a complete glaze of the base colour, which is Castellan green, and drag it back into the recesses to help blend in those colours. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use I'm going to shade this armour down even more, and I want to use, for that shade I'm not just going to use Castellan green with black. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use an analogous colour on the colour chart, a complementary colour, which is going to be like a dark purple, and I'm actually going to shade this armour down into the dark areas with a sort of a dark purple. So I'm going to do the glaze of Castellan green first, just to blend the colours a little bit more, and then I'm going to glaze down into the dark areas with a sort of a dark purple. Okay, so I've got this ready. As you can see, it is very thin, and so for the first one I'm just going to use this, and very carefully, because remember I've blacked everything up now. I'm just going to drag this back into the recesses, away from the lighter areas. and this will help that that colour transition that we're after. Let's get this, there we go, it's all focused. Just like so. Because in order to make those highlights stand out, it does need to be exaggerated in terms of the darker areas of the miniature, so it does need to get exaggerated. So I'm going to continue in this fashion, and yeah. So as you can see with the purple, is that it is, I wouldn't say it's lighter or darker than Castellane green. I would say that it is, in terms of light and dark, the same, just a different colour. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to put a bit of lich purple in that glaze that I prepared before, and then what I'll do is I'll start adding tiny amounts of black to it to darken it, and just keep on dragging those down into the recesses. Okay, so after mixing the green and the purple together, there's sort of this off purpley, dark browny kind of colour, which I quite like actually, because it fits with the whole Nurgle theme. So now initially we dragged, so this is after I've done 2 glazes of black down with the Castellane green. So this has started to bring all the colours together. Now with this purpley green colour, instead of obviously dragging to the highlights, I'm going to drag into the recesses, like so. Just make sure there's not too much on the brush, and then simply drag it into the recesses, like so. This may need to be slightly thinner, we'll see. Very, very carefully and very lightly. So this is working quite nicely. What I'll probably do is I'll do 2 or 3 coats of the dark purple, add a little bit of black, and I'll do the last shade with that. Okay, so now you can see the effect that it's starting to have on the armour. It's starting to give it a lot more depth, which is great. So I'm going to add a tiny bit of black into the glaze, and that'll be the final one I'll do. Yeah. So for the final shade with the now that a bit of black has been added, you're going even further into the shadows, so you're not going to start as far, always close to the highlights as you were before. So you can go right into the shadows over there, just like so. And you're just going to continue in that fashion. Okay, there we go. Now we're starting to get the effect that I actually wanted to achieve with the armour. So now you can see that some of the glaze is still drying, but now we're starting to get that sort of depth of colour, and that nice sort of slightly off purple shading with the green complements it quite nicely. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to just sharpen up the highlights ever so slightly, and then I will work on the fur. I'm going to probably add a wash, yes, a wash, I normally never do washes, to the fur, something like dark flesh maybe, to that, just because it looks a bit too light and out of place. Alrighty. Okay, so I'm going to make a very thin wash using dark flesh. I don't know what the new colour is, don't ask me, look it up yourself, with some lamium medium, and just get that really, really thin. You see it's sort of a reddish brown, isn't it? But it needs to be very thin, because it's just going to sink into all recesses and tint the fur. So I think that should look pretty good. Let's just see what happens, eh? Watch me screw it up. Hee hee. Okay. Yeah, not too bad. Cool. Just gonna get them fairly heavily. Not too crazy, because I don't want it to run into the rest of the miniature. Just want to tint that. Alright, so I'll finish that up. And I've just made the fur look like spaghetti. Yeah, wait until it dries, see what happens. Okay, so while the fur wash is drying, I'm going to work on the leather binding on the weapon. So for this then, it's been base coated scorch brown. Just gonna be careful that I don't overlap onto any of the leather. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it sort of a reddish leather colour. So now that the scorch brown's on there, I'm actually going to paint the individual straps with scab red, and then from there I'm going to work it up to like a blood red, maybe with a touch of brown. We'll see what happens. So I'll just use blood red, and I don't know if you'd call this a wet brush as opposed to a dry brush, because I'm just trying to get the actual straps and leave the gaps in between as a scorched brown. So the brush needs to be used essentially as a flat brush, okay, and then dragged along the surface of the strapping very carefully. And this color is quite a thin color, so it's probably require 2 coats to get it looking 100%. Okay, so now that that's been coated with the fuck's sake, stupid goddamn camera. Anyway, so now that has been coated with the scab red, I'm going to go back and start highlighting the individual leather straps with initially a combination of scab red and blood red, and then finally small little highlights of blood red. So just very lightly 50-50 mix of scab red and blood red, and ever so gently highlighting these small ribbons like so. Just continue in that fashion. And then finally I'm just going to use a very, very slight and small coating of blood red. And then just ever so lightly highlight the prominent sort of lips, so slight raised edges of the actual leather itself, like so. Actually, you know what, I don't feel that the highlights are pushed enough, so I'm going to add a tiny bit of the old glaze that I have of that, what is it called, carrick stone. I'm just going to mix that in to the remaining blood red. Try not to make it too pink, and just add one last sort of sharp, hard edge highlight just to push these highlights. Alright, so I'm relatively happy with the strapping. I'll see how it looks once I've started doing all the other details, but I might come back and change it up a little bit. Okay, so now the wash is drying on the fur. It's looking a little bit less like spaghetti and a bit ruddier, so I actually like that. That's okay. And now you can see the armour. There's ever so slight hints of dark purple in the recesses. That's really making it sort of stand out a bit better. And once I start doing the details on the rivets, it'll look better. Okay, so I think the next thing to do may be the bone and the horns. So the ends of that remnants of the creature that make up the fur. Got the claws there. He's got the tusks sticking out of his helmet. That sort of claw thing there, and also the skulls on his cloak. So yeah, I'm going to start off probably with something like graveyard earth. I'm going to black them first. So I'm going to redo the black just so I make out exactly where it starts and where it stops, and then I'm just going to do them graveyard earth and go from there. I'm just going to paint black all of all of the tusks again. Don't wobble. And then yeah, continue that fashion and then redo them graveyard earth. So now that I've got the black paint out, I'm actually going to take this opportunity to do a bit more blacking on other things, like for example the belt buckle, and any areas where I've got overlapping of paint. I'll take the opportunity just to neaten things up and black things out again. So now I'm just going to go ahead and, it's actually not graveyard earth, it's the new one, Steel Legion drab. I'm just going to put that on all of the bony areas, the tusk, this little shoulder thing, animal paw, and also the skulls on the back. So I'm just going to go ahead and base coat that now. So as usual, just making sure you get a nice smooth coat of paint on the surface. Again, I may have to do 2 coats of paint just so that I'm happy that it's got a nice smooth base coat on all the areas that I'm going to paint bone. And now what I'm going to do is prepare a glaze of Carrick stone, and from Carrick stone I'll then go up to bleached bone. So start off with this bit of bleached bone, and then I may do a very sort of soft red in the recesses, but I'll see how I get on. So same again, I'm just going to use this and drag it towards the ends of the areas I'd like bone coloured. Start off with the tusks. Simply drag the colour out like so. And as usual, it'll probably take about 3 coats to build up the colours and get that really nice transition that I'm after. And with the skulls, what I'll probably do is drag down to the cheekbones where it would catch the light. So if you look here, it'll be lighter down here, and then that area there would catch the light, and it would be dark just below it. So that's the way I'm going to work that with the skulls. Alright, I'll get that done. And after doing the Carrick stone, I'll then move on to some bleached bone, or Ushabti bone as it's now called, and do the same thing except on the extreme edges, and then move up to a tiny amount of skull whites. And I'm just going to add a small amount of skull white to the mix for the final highlights. Excellent. Placed on the extreme edges. Like so. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is the rivets in the armour. So for these I'm just going to touch some of the bit of black, because I actually want to do them like a little non-metallic metal. And then I'm going to do some very basic rust effects. So I'll get some black on them and then do some rust effects. Very easy to do. Just going to get those really light black dots on there now. Like so. I'm actually being a complete idiot. I shouldn't have put the black dots on. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to paint the rust on with dark flesh first, and then I'm going to use blazing orange and then a fiery orange right at the end to do these rust effects. So I'm just going to start off with a tiny amount of dark flesh. I don't have to be too careful with this, as it's the first layer for the rust. Then we're going to continue in this fashion. So I've done some few dots of dark flesh here. As you can see, I've just added a few other small little areas of rust, and what I'll do is it will be almost like, not necessarily highlights, but light areas within that of the blazing orange, and then the blazing orange will have light areas again of the fiery orange within that. So I'm just going to do it ever so carefully with the blazing orange, like so.
small dots, remembering to leave a border of the original dark flesh. And just continue in this fashion. Okay, I'm actually going to leave it at the blazing orange and not go any higher than that. And now this is when we can start blacking the rivets to do them almost like a little non-metallic metal. Alright. So now that I'm more or less happy with the rust effects on the miniature, I'm going to go back and probably start doing the non-metallics on the actual miniature. So that'll be things like the belt buckle, all of the little rivets, the chainmail, probably that skull, and also I'll move on to the weapon itself. And with the metallics again, I'll probably do non-metallics and add in quite a bit of sort of rust effect to it. So with the non-metallics, I'll start off with a grey, normally a codex grey. I'll thin that right down. And it needs to be extremely thin, or else you do get watermarks. And I'll start building up the first coat with that. Just going to get this nice and thin. I used 2 brush loads worth of paint to get this really thin. Yep. Okay, so that's nice and good. So again, that sort of milky consistency. And I'm just going to work up to the raised areas. As usual, do the old skin test. And I'm just going to work up to all of the raised areas. Now this does take a bit of time and patience to get the non-metallic metals looking good, but the end product is good. So there we go. So I'll just continue in this fashion, getting that first coat on, do about 3 coats, and then just keep building it up. So as you can see, the colours have started to get built up. Now with non-metallics, it's all about contrast, so making sure you got basically black to white, and then colours in between. So I'm just going to put this up to a slightly lighter grey now. It's probably going to be the fortress grey, and then I'll go all the way up to white. So it's just the same again. A couple of drops of medium with the fortress grey, and just dragging up to the prominent points that you think would catch the light. Just like so. Really gradually building this up. All the sharp edges and all of the areas that the light would catch. Like so. A couple of coats of this, and then all the way up to white, and it should look good. Okay, so now as you can see, I'm starting to push those highlights on the metallics, on the belt buckle, and also on the skull and the knee. And I've also started to add tiny little dots onto the rivets. However, as you'll notice with the skull, normally what you do is you go all the way up to white, and then you go back and review it. So you think, okay, well, it might not look okay now, but once you've added your white, tiny little white highlights, see how it looks, and you can go back and shade back down again with black if you need to. Alright. And finally I'm going to go all the way up to white, which has been thinned down ever so slightly, and then just adding it onto the most prominent points of the actual metal. like so. Okay, now we can see it's starting to bring that out a bit better. There we go. So now it's looking a little bit better. Good stuff. So for the chainmail, I'm probably going to work with ever so slightly thinned down Codex Grey, and almost dry brush it on to the chainmail and see how we get on. There we go. Because obviously a glaze will just sink straight into the recesses of the chainmail, and it's not what we want. So just going to very gently dry brush that on to most but not all of the chainmail, leaving the ever so sort of tucked away recesses. Just going to leave those dark and black. Making sure we get all of the edges in, and then with that we'll just keep working that up with lighter colours. And there we go. I'm fairly happy with that chainmail. That metallics. It's basic. It's not my best, but it'll do. It'll do for the purposes of this demonstration. And now on to doing the non-metallics on the weapon. So now that I'm more or less happy with what's going on in the centre, I'm going to go ahead and attach the arms with the weapon so that I can start doing the wood of the weapon and also all of the non-metallics. So I'm going to go ahead and attach all of that now. Yeah, and then start working on the wood and the non-metallics. Okay, so that's the weapon I'm stuck on, in a sense. I've had to use a bit of green stuff in the joints. However, I won't paint that just yet because it has to be fully dry, or else the paint will crack on the surface. So I will complete the actual. I'll do the wood first, because I'm not 100% sure if I like the red leather effect. I might have to mute that down a bit. So I'll hold off on doing the non-metallics on the flail, and I'll do the wood effect so far. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to re-black the actual shaft of the weapon, because it's got some brown on it, and then I'll go from there. So what I'm going to do for the wood is I'm actually going to paint it with Karak stone, get a really nice coat on there, and I'm actually going to paint the grain of the wood on the miniature with a liner pen. An idea I got from Oasis Rising, and it's just a 0.05 pen. I'm going to paint the grain on, and then I'm actually going to put a brown ink over the whole thing. So I'm just going to get the base coat on with this Karak stone really carefully. It's probably going to require 2 coats of paint to get a nice even smooth coat on there. Okay, now that this is dry, I'm going to lights a bit better there. Now that that coat is dry, I'm going to use a Staedtler pigment liner 0.05 to just draw the wood grain on before I stain it with an ink. So I'm going to hold it like so, and very gently draw the wood grain on. And naturally, it doesn't matter if it's not a perfectly straight line, because it is wood grain. And I may add some knots and some eyes in the actual the wood grain as I go on. So with the inks this will take a while to dry, and then I'll apply the brown ink over the top, and I'll pick out the spikes and I will do those separately on the actual miniature. And then I'll finally move on to the non-metallic metals on the weapon, and also the where those claws join in the actual fur coat, so that area there, I'll paint that to look like sort of a like some sort of leather, and then I'll move on to the scenic base. Okay, and I'm going to use some of the old Citadel brown ink. You could probably get away with using one of the newer washes for this, and one of the problems with ink is the finish. You get like a very glossy finish, and it also takes a while to dry. Now the trick with this is you can't speed up the drying. However, what you can do is when it dries that glossy colour, you can put the satin varnish on it to stop it from looking so glossy, which is generally what I do for my entire miniature anyway. So let's do this and see how badly it screws it up. So I'm just being sure to drag the ink into the recesses. Yeah, not too bad. We'll see what it looks like when it dries, and it's had a coat of the It's had a coat of the satin varnish on it. Alrighty. Okay, I'm actually going to I've blacked out the little spikes, and I'm actually going to give the whole thing a coat of the satin varnish now, including the leather strapping, just to see how that comes out, because I want to see what it looks like, and I might change it because I don't think I like the colours, but we'll see what it looks like with a bit of the varnish on it, because that does tend to complete the look. So let's see how it looks. So now that the satin varnish has been put on, it looks a bit more acceptable. Looks okay. The red is meh, not too bad. I mean, I'll do the non-metallic metals on the weapon and then see how the red fits in. But I'm probably going to end up muting that down a little bit, I think. So I'll crack on with the non-metallic metals in the same fashion I did everything else. So all the points that would catch the light, so the upper areas, where you want to get your light to. So using the same method as with all glazes, is you simply dragging the colour up. Okay, and then the most prominent point is going to have a sharp white highlight, and I'll do the same all down the chain, so the upper points of each link in the chain will have the light areas. Alright, so as you can see, I've started to colour all of the non-metallic areas, excluding the spikes, so the flail, the end of the flail, and all of the chain link started to be coloured now, and now I'm getting an idea of exactly where I want the highlights to be on the non-metallics, and I'll just start building this up with the lighter grey, fortress grey again, and then up to white. Okay, so I'm now going to continue with the non-metallic metals, and I'm simply going to start building up the highlights, or continue to build up the highlights rather, with the actual non-metallic metals on the weapon. So I've already done the first coat of the fortress grey glaze, and I'm going to continue to build that up along the weapon and really try and smooth that out before going on to pure skull white to make that contrast apparent and really bring the non-metallic metals out. Okay, now that I've prepared my glaze of fortress grey, as you can see it's fairly thin, Not as thin as normal though, because I now want to really start pushing these highlights. So let's start off with the hilt assembly at the end here. There we go. And when using thicker colours, it's very important not to overwork it. When using very, very thin glazes, you can afford to work it on the miniature, whereas this, it's a lot more unforgiving. Alright, so you need to be a bit more precise in your application. And as usual, just dragging it up to the most prominent points where it will catch the light. And I'll keep on going in this fashion for all the chains and the weapon. And now that I've been working up to the prominent points on all the metallics, with the smaller points, there's no point. There's no point. Starting off really dark. So now for these little spikes on the actual weapon, this is where you can get away with start sort of adding the colour straight on to the angles and up, if that makes sense, because simply there's not enough space on such a small surface to get that colour transition. So whoop, can you even see that? Jesus. So you want to almost start the next glaze colour up, really, and then, like I said, on the angles and towards the end, because they are sort of pyramidal shape, if that makes sense. Just like so. Boom, that colour up. Oh yeah, nice spikes to bash people in the face with. Just the way Nurgle likes it. There we go, shit, man. Cool. And as you can see, I've started to build up the highlights and the mace, sorry, the flail. But I'll go back and I'll add a bit of rust effects and stuff to this anyway, so I'll keep on going with the spikes and move on to the next section. Okay, so I think we're safe to move on to a white glaze. I'll probably use like 2 parts white to 1 part fortress grey, and then go up to straight white at the end, just for a tiny little bit of a highlight. Make it pop? Shut up. Right. Okay, so what I'm going to actually do is use dark flash, and I'm actually going to line. So if you look at the leather strapping, I'm going to line the center of it. Show you what I mean. So if that's a strap there, I'm actually going to put a line of dark flesh down the middle. Like so. We'll see what that does. Okay, so that's muting it down slightly, which is exactly what I wanted. Perfecto. So now I'm going to attempt the lining in between the gloves, trying to flatten my brush out, which doesn't seem to be working. Yeah, close enough. There we go. And very carefully line the in between the gloves, like so. Okay, and I'll do the same for the other gauntlet. Now also what I want to do is the green stuff that's holding the arms on, in between there, I want to get that blacked out as well. It's nothing fancy, just get it completely black. Being very careful not to go over the work that I've done already, because that would severely piss me off. Like so, and just get that blacked out, nothing more. Okay, the miniatures are almost done. Miniature is almost done. However, there's a couple of things that I want to do, and that is I want to weather some of the non-metallic metals, make them a bit rusty, and also I'm not happy with the colour transition on the flail, or the ball at the end of the flail. So I'm now going to go back with the original grey, which is the Codex grey, and I'm actually going to do a glaze over it with that. Okay, so I've prepared a super duper thin glaze, and it's very similar to the glaze I used once I'd done the armour with the Castellan green, just to bring all the colours together, which is what I'm going to use on the end of the flail. The flail at the end of the flail, the mace at the end, I don't know what it's called, anyway. And all I'm going to do, same again, is go from light to dark, and this should take a couple of coats really. Normally 2 or 3 coats, and it should really blend everything in together. So I'm just going to keep going in this fashion, like, you know, and get that done. So I've done a few glazes of the the darker grey, the Codex grey, I'm actually going to do something a little bit out there. So I'm going to do Fortress grey. I'm actually going to do a bit of lining on the prominent edges with Fortress grey just out of the part. It's a very, very thin edge lining. Like so. Just to define that shape. Like so. Lovely jubbly. Okay, just gonna keep going in that fashion. Maybe a few more glazes and then I'll be happy. Now I'm gonna go back and just touch the ever so prominent areas with pure skull white, like yeah. That's the shit. Stuff. Okay, two last things. God, go clean my brush. Two last things. The animal leather claw thing, and also I want to add a bit of rust onto the non-metallics because I'm pretty happy with those now. And that should be the miniature finished, and then I'll go into the scenic base. So for the little hand bit, oh shit, what the hell? I'm going to use shadow grey, one of my favourite colours. I'm going to dilute it ever so slightly with the mix from the Fortress grey. And I'm just going to hit it. I'm going to hit it with paint. Another stupid saying that gets used a lot. On the prominent areas, like so. I'm just going to lighten that up, probably about 2 tones. Yep, one more tone. Quite a light tone this time. Add tiny dots. Jesus, I can't see what I'm doing. There we go. And that'll do. And then I'm going to add the rust effects to all the non-metallics. So for the little rust areas in the non-metallics, I'm going to do the same again as I did in the armour. I'm going to add dark flesh into sort of the chinks of the metal, and add tiny little dots of blazing orange. Yeah, blazing orange. So again, it's almost like the lining that you would do with black, except you're doing it in the recesses of the metals, like so. Get a nice sharp point on your brush. That's not very sharp, is it, Gus? There we go. Right. And just get all of the little nooks and crannies. Like so. Just to add that little bit of rust effect, and then we'll work that up with blazing orange. Alrighty. So now I've added some rudimentary rust effects around the spikes on the shaft of the weapon, also around the flail. I've not done it on the chain because the chain will be moving all the time, but I have done it on some of the little spikes. So now I'll go in with the blazing orange and do little sort of highlights on those, making sure to leave a border of the dark flesh. So I'll just start with the little the knee skull, the skull of the knee skull. So little tiny little bits of the orange in. Where it's sort of started to corrode away fully. Yeah. Alrighty, let's keep going in that fashion. Okay, now I'm actually fairly happy with this warrior. You'll notice that I manhandle the miniature a lot. I have my fingers touching it a lot, but that's because everything that I work on and then I get happy with, you know, like the armour, etc., as I'm going along, I normally give 2 coats of satin varnish, and that protects the miniature. It gives a nice finish to it. So I've got it on a plinth, a cork base to work with it. But it gives me the chance to get hands on the miniature and get more steady. So that's the way I work. Look forward to part 2, where I will be doing the scenic base for this bad boy. Crush your skull! Take care, guys.